My name is Marissa Cole. I'm 31 years old, and I run a small interior renovation business in Charleston. For 2 years, I thought I was building a life with a man who just needed a little stability to find his footing. What I didn't realize was that stability, to him, meant me, my money, my planning, my willingness to carry weight he never intended to pick up himself. His name was Jordan Hayes. He was 30, charming, introspective, and deeply convinced he was on the verge of something bigger. He called himself a creative strategist, which, in practice, meant inspirational captions, expensive self-development courses, and long conversations about future abundance that never quite arrived. We'd been dating a little over a year before we moved in together downtown. By the time we'd lived under the same roof for 8 months, I was covering about 80% of the rent. I co-signed the lease because his credit wasn't ready yet. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself that partnerships weren't always perfectly balanced at the same time. That was my first mistake. The breakup happened on a Tuesday. I remember because I'd just come home exhausted from a job site, dust in my hair, hands aching, brain fried from coordinating subcontractors. Jordan was already home. The living room looked staged, candles, laptop open, low meditation music humming like a spa lobby. He sat cross-legged on the rug, palms resting on his knees, eyes soft in that practiced way. "I've been doing a lot of inner work," he began. I waited. "I've realized I've been living in a space that doesn't allow my authentic self to expand." I blinked, still standing near the door, boots half off. "And I think," he said gently, "I need to take a step back from our relationship." There it was. No anger, no fight, just language. Vague, spiritual, impossible to argue with. Then he smiled at me. "But we'll still be friends, right? You've always looked out for me." That was the moment something cold settled in my chest. Because he wasn't asking about me. He was asking about everything I'd been doing for him. I stood there, processing being dumped via self-actualization jargon, and watched him relax, like he'd already received the answer he wanted. He started talking immediately about how mature this was, how healthy, how little would really change. The apartment, the bills, the car issues, the business expenses, all of it assumed, still mine. I realized then, Jordan wasn't ending the relationship. He was just renegotiating my role. So I smiled back. "Of course," I said, "we can be friends." And that was the moment I decided he was finally going to learn what friendship actually looks like. Jordan relaxed fast after I agreed. Not relieved in a quiet, grateful way. Relieved like a problem had solved itself. "This is actually really healthy for us," he said, standing up and stretching, already moving on. "Most people can't evolve like this without blowing everything up." I nodded, still standing by the door. "I mean, nothing really has to change overnight," he continued. "We've built a good system here. We can ease into this." A system. That word stuck with me. He walked over to the kitchen counter and leaned against it, completely at ease, like we'd just negotiated a minor scheduling conflict instead of the end of a relationship. "So obviously," he said, "we'll keep the apartment for now. It makes sense. And you're already handling most of the bills, so—" I held up a hand. "Wait," I said calmly. "What do you mean, we?" He blinked, genuinely confused. "Well," he said, smiling, "we're still friends, and it would be stressful for me to deal with a big transition while I'm doing this inner work." There it was. Not malice, not cruelty. Entitlement, delivered gently, like it was self-evident. I took off my boots and set them neatly by the door, buying myself a moment. "And the rent?" I asked. "Utilities? Internet? Your car payment?" He frowned slightly, like I'd asked something unnecessarily technical. "We'll figure it out," he said. "You always do." I looked at him then, really looked. This man had just ended our relationship because he needed space to explore himself. But the moment I asked how he planned to stand on his own, he defaulted to me like muscle memory. "I'm good for it eventually," he added quickly. "Things are about to shift for me. I can feel it." "Eventually." I nodded again. "And in the meantime?" I asked. He hesitated, just a fraction of a second. "Well, you wouldn't just leave me hanging," he said, lowering his voice. "That wouldn't be very you." There it was again. Not a request, a reminder of the role he'd assigned me. The fixer, the stabilizer, the safety net. I felt something inside me settle, not with anger, but with clarity. He wasn't confused about boundaries. He was counting on me not having any. "So," he said, smiling again, "we're good?" I met his eyes. "Yeah," I said evenly, "we're good." He exhaled, visibly relieved. "That's such a relief," he said. "I knew you'd understand." He leaned in and kissed my cheek, quick, familiar, thoughtless, then grabbed his water bottle like the conversation was over. I stood there, watching him move through the apartment he assumed would always be mine to manage. Jordan didn't see friendship as mutual support. He saw it as continued access, just without accountability. That night, he fell asleep easily. I didn't. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment I'd brushed off before, every time I'd covered a shortfall, every time I'd told myself it was temporary. By morning, my decision was already made. If Jordan wanted to experience real friendship, I was finally going to treat him like an equal. And equals don't get carried. I didn't say anything the next morning. Jordan woke up late, wandered into the kitchen in his socks, and started talking about a podcast he'd listened to on masculine energy and creative alignment. He spoke with his hands, animated, convinced he was standing at the edge of some breakthrough. I nodded, made coffee, let him talk. Because what I was doing didn't require an announcement. That weekend, he left town for a 3-day wellness retreat outside Savannah. Breathwork, cold plunges, journaling. A reset, he'd called it. The moment his car pulled out of the lot, the apartment felt different, quieter, lighter. I opened my laptop and started making a list. Not emotional, not dramatic, practical. What belongs to me, what's in my name, what needs to be transferred. I packed efficiently. Clothes first, tools second. The small things that had accumulated without me noticing. Extra chargers, my coffee grinder, the measuring tape I always had to replace because he borrowed it. By Saturday evening, my half of the closet was empty. On Sunday morning, I signed a lease for a small rental house 20 minutes outside the city. Nothing fancy, quiet street, enough space for me to breathe. Then I handled the logistics. Utilities, transferred. Internet, moved. Auto pay, removed. I sat on hold with customer service, listening to looping music, calmly untangling myself from 8 months of shared convenience. By Sunday night, my name was no longer quietly propping up Jordan's life. Monday morning, before my first job site meeting, I sent one text. Hey, just a heads up, I moved out over the weekend. All utilities are transferred to your name now. I figured full independence would support your growth. Wishing you the best. I didn't add an explanation. I didn't apologize. Friends don't explain themselves for respecting boundaries. The call came the next afternoon. Marissa, Jordan said, breathless, I think there's been some mistake. No mistake, I replied calmly, stepping outside the job site to take the call. I transferred everything so you could handle it directly. A pause. The internet's not working, he said, and half the lights won't turn on. That makes sense, I said. They're in your name now. Another pause, longer this time. But how am I supposed to afford all of this on my own? I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. You'll figure it out, I said. You're capable. I believe in you. He didn't say anything after that. By Thursday, reality had fully arrived. A rent notice, a car making that familiar transmission noise, bills he'd never actually seen before. That night, he called again. This time, he was crying. I don't know how to handle all of this, he said. I thought when we said we'd stay friends, you'd help me get on my feet. I closed my eyes. I am helping, I said gently. I'm letting you learn you can stand on your own. He hung up without saying goodbye. And for the first time in months, I slept through the night. The shift was almost immediate. When Jordan realized I wasn't coming back, financially, practically, or emotionally, his tone changed. Confusion gave way to indignation. Indignation curdled into narrative. He didn't call me again. Instead, he posted. At first, it was subtle. A black and white photo of the sky with a caption about releasing people who can't support your growth. A story slide about financial control disguised as love. A quote graphic about how abandonment is abuse when it happens at your most vulnerable moment. No names, no details, just enough implication to invite sympathy. Our mutual friends noticed. A couple of them texted me cautiously, asking if everything was okay, saying they'd seen Jordan's posts and just wanted to make sure I was doing all right too. I kept my replies short, neutral, calm. I'm fine. We broke up. I'm giving him space. I wasn't interested in defending myself against a story that required distortion to survive. Not long after I moved out, he filled the apartment the way he always filled instability, by bringing someone else into the orbit. That's how his new roommate reached out. Her name was Lena. She was 26, a freelance photographer trying to build a client base while juggling inconsistent income. We'd always been polite, friendly, but distant. Two women orbiting the same man in different ways. Her message was hesitant. Hey, I hope this isn't weird. I just wanted to check in about some apartment stuff. Jordan's been saying you cut him off financially and he might not be able to make rent. I stared at my phone for a long moment. That word again? Cut him off. As if support was a tap I'd cruelly turned. I replied carefully. I moved out and transferred the bills that were in my name. Everything else is his. She responded almost immediately. Okay, that's not exactly how he explained it. Over the next few days, Lena and I talked more. Not gossip, logistics. She told me she'd been covering groceries because Jordan kept waiting for money to clear, that he'd enrolled in 2 different online business courses, both expensive, while saying he was stressed about rent, that he'd bought new equipment on credit, insisting it was an investment. The more she talked, the clearer the pattern became. Jordan wasn't struggling because I left. He was struggling because I'd stopped absorbing the consequences of his choices. Then Lena mentioned something that made my stomach drop. He said something about a business loan, she wrote. Like a small one. I thought you knew. I didn't. That same evening, my phone rang. It was Evan, my accountant. He'd handled my business books for years. Meticulous, cautious, not prone to dramatics. Marissa, he said slowly, I got a strange call today. From Jordan. Apparently, Jordan had asked him for advice on managing some business debt. During the conversation, he'd casually mentioned a small loan he'd taken out a few months earlier. With a cosigner, Evan added. He said it was you. I felt the ground shift beneath me. I never co-signed anything, I said. There was a pause on the other end. That's what I was afraid you'd say. After we hung up, I pulled my credit report. I sat in my truck, engine off, staring at my phone as the page loaded. There it was, a $5,000 business loan. Opened 4 months earlier, my name attached. I hadn't signed it, I hadn't authorized it, I hadn't seen a cent. The smear campaign suddenly made sense. Jordan wasn't just panicking about bills. He was trying to control the story before the truth caught up to him. I didn't confront him right away. I sat there in my truck for a long time after pulling my credit report, watching the screen glow in the dark like it might change if I stared hard enough. $5,000 wasn't a life-ending amount, but the method mattered more than the number. Jordan hadn't asked. He hadn't hinted. He hadn't panicked and made a mistake. He'd planned. He'd used information he already had. My social security number from joint travel bookings, my employment details from shared paperwork, banking access from the months I'd covered expenses without thinking twice. He'd taken familiarity and turned it into access. And suddenly, every conversation from the past year rearranged itself. Every time he'd talked about future alignment, every time he'd framed my stability as something we shared, every time he'd joked about me being the responsible one. This wasn't impulsive. This was entitlement with a timeline. I called my lawyer the next morning. He listened quietly as I explained everything. The breakup, the friendship, the loan. When I finished, he didn't hesitate. This is identity theft, he said, and loan fraud. The words landed heavier than I expected. He explained the process calmly. Report the fraud. Contact the bank. Start an investigation. My name would likely be removed once authenticity was verified. But, he added, there's another option. I already knew what he meant. You could confront him first, my lawyer said. Give him a chance to admit it. Work out repayment privately. Avoid legal escalation. That version of me, the one who believed explanations mattered more than patterns, would have done exactly that. I would have called Jordan, listened, helped him fix it, paid it off myself just to make it go away. But that version of me was gone. I don't want to warn him, I said. I want the truth to surface on its own. My lawyer was quiet for a moment. Then we proceed formally, he said, quietly. The investigation moved faster than I expected. Within 2 weeks, the bank flagged the loan. Digital signature inconsistencies. IP mismatches. Documents that didn't line up with my verified records. Jordan didn't know any of that yet. All he knew was that something was wrong. My phone started lighting up. Missed calls, texts, voicemails. At first, confusion. Hey, I got a weird notice from the bank. I think there's been some mistake. Then panic. Please call me. I don't understand what's happening. Then desperation. I thought we were friends. By the 15th call, the tone shifted. How could you do this to me? You said we'd stay friends. I listened to every voicemail. I didn't answer a single one. Finally, I sent one message. Friends don't commit fraud. Nothing else. No explanation. No defense. The silence that followed was loud. The official notice reached Jordan 3 days later. I know because that's when the panic stopped sounding confused and started sounding desperate. 17 missed calls, 12 voicemails, messages stacked on top of each other so fast, my phone barely had time to lock. The first voicemail was breathless. Marissa, please. I don't know what's going on. The bank says they're investigating the loan. There has to be some kind of mix-up. By the 5th, his voice was shaking. I thought we were on the same page. I thought we trusted each other. By the 10th, he was crying. I can't deal with this right now. I'm already under so much pressure. You know I wasn't trying to hurt you. By the last one, the mask was gone. You promised we'd stay friends, he snapped. You're doing this on purpose. You're punishing me because you couldn't handle me choosing myself. I didn't respond. Because this wasn't about friendship anymore. It was about consequences. The bank contacted me directly a few days later, asked for verification, compared records, confirmed what my lawyer already knew. The digital signature didn't match. The email used wasn't mine. The IP address traced back to Jordan's laptop. Clear evidence. Once the bank escalated it formally, things moved quickly. My name was removed from the loan. A fraud report was filed. Jordan was notified that charges were being considered. That's when the public narrative exploded. Jordan took to social media like it was a courtroom. Long posts about betrayal, stories about men being punished for emotional growth, vague accusations of me weaponizing systems to maintain control. He never mentioned fraud. He never mentioned signatures. He framed it as abandonment, as cruelty, as revenge. Some people believed him. A few strangers sent me messages accusing me of destroying a man for daring to evolve. I didn't respond to those either. The truth doesn't argue. It waits. 3 weeks later, the investigation concluded. The bank found definitive proof of identity theft. Jordan was charged. No jail time. His lawyer negotiated a plea deal. But he had to repay the loan in full immediately, plus penalties. 18 months of probation, credit destroyed. When the charges became public record, his post disappeared. But the damage wasn't done yet. Jordan wasn't finished unraveling. About a month after the charges were filed, I was working on a kitchen renovation in Mount Pleasant. It was a visible job site. Corner house, main road, my truck parked out front with my business logo on both doors. The homeowners were inside with me while we measured cabinets, dust in the air, radio humming softly in the background. I heard my name before I saw him. Marissa! Sharp, loud, unhinged. I stepped toward the front window just in time to see Jordan standing beside my truck, arms flailing, face red, eyes wild. The homeowners froze. He was yelling about betrayal, about lies, about how I'd ruined his life. Neighbors started coming out of their houses, phones already in hands. I walked outside. Jordan, I said evenly, you need to leave. This is private property. That's when he really lost it. You destroyed my future, he screamed. You hid behind lawyers because you couldn't handle rejection. The homeowners stood in their yard, horrified. I kept my voice steady. This isn't the place for this. He stepped closer, pointing at my chest. I loved you, I trusted you, and this is how you repay me for choosing to grow beyond you? There it was. The story he needed to believe. I looked at him. This man who had forged my signature, manipulated our friends, and framed consequences as abuse. I didn't ruin your life, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. You just stopped having someone to hide your mistakes behind. Someone screamed for him to calm down. Someone else started filming. Sirens sounded in the distance. Jordan heard them and panicked. He jumped into his car, peeling away down the street, still screaming out the window that this wasn't over. But it was, because the video didn't disappear. It went viral. You could see my truck, my business name. You could hear his accusations. You could see me standing still while he fell apart. Charleston shared it everywhere. And something unexpected happened. People didn't see a villain. They saw composure. I didn't see the video until that night. A friend texted me a link with no explanation. Just, hey, are you okay? The clip was less than 2 minutes long. 2 minutes of my life, stripped of context, and somehow perfectly clear. You could see my truck parked at the curb, my logo clean and visible in the sunlight. You could hear Jordan before you saw him, his voice sharp, frantic, unraveling. You could hear the way his accusations piled on top of each other, getting louder, less coherent, more desperate. And then there was me, standing still, hands at my sides, voice calm. I watched it twice, once with dread, once with a strange sense of relief. Because there was nothing to explain. By the next morning, the video was everywhere. TikTok first, then Twitter, then Facebook community pages. Someone had added captions. This is how you handle crazy. Imagine staying this calm under pressure. Hire this contractor immediately. I sat at my kitchen table, coffee going cold, watching notifications stack up. Not hate. Inquiries. Calls asking if I was available for estimates. Messages asking how far out I was booked. People saying they'd seen the video and liked how I handled myself. The irony was almost painful. Jordan had spent weeks trying to destroy my reputation. Instead, he'd handed me the best marketing I'd never asked for. By the end of the week, I was booked solid for 4 months. A waiting list formed. 3 large renovation projects lined up for the following year. I hired 2 part-time guys just to keep up. Meanwhile, Jordan disappeared. His social media went dark, posts deleted, comments locked. The narrative he'd tried to control collapsed under the weight of evidence and public perception. Lena texted me quietly. He had to move out. Couldn't afford the place. A few weeks later, she added, he's back with his parents, rural North Carolina. I felt no triumph, no glee. Just distance. The last message I ever got from him came late one night. I hope you're happy. I didn't reply. But the truth was, I was. Not because he'd fallen, but because I hadn't caught him. 10 months passed faster than I thought they would. Life didn't dramatically reset itself. It didn't suddenly become perfect, but it became steady, the kind of steady I'd been trying to create for 2 people when it was only ever meant for one. My business kept growing, not explosively anymore, just solid, sustainable growth, the kind that comes from reputation, not spectacle. Clients referred friends. Contractors returned my calls. I stopped bracing for the next crisis. And in the quiet left behind, something unexpected happened. I started seeing Owen, not my accountant, but one of the subcontractors I'd known for years. He was straightforward, calm, financially responsible in a way that wasn't flashy or performative. When something broke, he fixed it. When he said he'd be somewhere, he showed up. We didn't rush. We talked about money early, expectations, boundaries, what partnership actually meant. For the first time, nothing felt like a negotiation disguised as love. We split expenses. We solved problems together. No one was rescuing anyone. Meanwhile, Jordan's story kept shrinking. A mutual acquaintance told me he'd tried restarting his online presence with posts about learning from mistakes and rebuilding after toxic relationships. The engagement never came. People remembered the video, the charges, the patterns. Small towns don't forget like the internet does. I ran into his sister Claire at a coffee shop one afternoon. She looked tired, older. I owe you an apology, she said quietly. He told us you were controlling, that you'd financially punished him. She shook her head. He moved back home and we saw it firsthand. The spending, the excuses, the way nothing was ever his fault. She told me their parents had refused to co-sign anything, that their father had made it clear if Jordan ever forged a signature again, he'd be the one calling the police. I think that was the moment it finally landed, she said. That charm doesn't work forever. When she left, I sat there for a long time, stirring my coffee I didn't need anymore. Jordan wasn't evil. He was enabled, and I'd been his favorite enabler. Looking back, I don't think Jordan ever intended to become someone who committed fraud. I think he became someone who learned, slowly, dangerously, that consequences were optional as long as someone else absorbed them. I was that someone. I thought I was being supportive, understanding, patient. What I was really doing was teaching him that responsibility was negotiable if he framed his needs emotionally enough. 2 years of dating had convinced him I owed him permanence, that my stability belonged to him, that even after he walked away, I'd still manage the fallout. The moment I stopped, the illusion collapsed. Not because I was cruel, but because I was no longer complicit. Jordan wanted to find out who he really was without anyone else's influence. It turns out, without someone buffering the consequences, he couldn't function. Meanwhile, I found out who I was when I stopped rescuing people from their own choices. I wasn't angry. I wasn't vengeful. I was free. We are still friends in the only sense that matters. He is a cautionary tale about entitlement dressed up as growth. And I am proof that boundaries don't destroy lives. They reveal the truth. You don't always need revenge when someone betrays you. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is step back and let them show the world exactly who they are.